envoy. Thank you very much for Women and Girls. She's very focused on elected women. But I wonder, can you give us a commitment that the voices of civil society and actual girls will be involved in decision making rather than those that are able to get into elected positions?
Of course. The whole thrust also of our response is to work locally, in country, and by definition that's working with the most vulnerable. But I think that if Harriet were here, she would defend her desire to work with elected women locally in situ, not entirely to be governed by the views in a parliament like ours, or indeed in a government like ours. So I think both are right. It's not an either or.
Good. Thank you very much. Can I pass over to Monica, please?
Thank you. Foreign Secretary, if I could just pick up, you say that you are absolutely committed to development and that the poorest people in the world should not be at the mercy of political decisions. And yet your government has cut the aid budget by 40%, much further than any other government, in fact the lowest level for 50 years. Can you see how those two things don't add up?
Well, first, what I said was that leaders that I have met in the global south are saying they do not want to be at the whim of political decisions in places like Westminster that can turn development on, turn development off, and make political decisions about pots of funding. And the example was women and girls. That's what I said. I didn't say it was my view. I said it's what I'm hearing back. The second thing I said was that if you look since the development story began, which is really a post-war, end of empire story, that actually aid spending has often been relative to defence spending. I don't accept the premise that defence does not keep people safe, because it does. We do have to invest in defence at this time, and I don't think there's anybody in the committee that's going to disagree with that. We are not shrinking our ambition in the UK. We do want to get back to higher spend, but we will still be the biggest global spender. I made an announcement just 3 weeks ago of our commitment to Gavi. We are the biggest single donor to Gavi. That's not shrinking from ambition. That's stepping up when others are stepping back. But it is the case that we've got to look across the whole arsenal of what government can do. And for that reason, we do have to reduce spending. But overall, I would defend moving to a model where we're reliant on our technical skills. How can we harness the City of London on areas like climate finance? It is still the case that many of the countries to which the committee have gone to have not got sufficient health systems. How can we actually help people with the technical procedures to have their own health systems? I don't think the committee is in a place where it would be saying that Britain should be engaged in the 21st century in massive service delivery in country. We should be helping countries to service that. So reform is necessary, and I stand by the decision to reform. But yes, of course, it's sad that we weren't able, as the West, to do that a few years ago collectively.
Foreign Secretary, can I come to Sudan? Sudan, I don't need to, of course, remind you that it's the worst humanitarian crisis since aid began, and there are war crimes being committed, it seems, as almost a daily basis. Foreign Secretary, there's been one statement in 7 months from yourself on Sudan. Is the government treating this as a priority?
Well, in that statement in the House of Commons, I called out the fact that right across the Western world, there has been too little attention on Sudan. It was me that went to the UN and put down a resolution and almost got that resolution despite the Russian veto on Sudan. It was me that led a statement on Sudan. It was me that went to the Chad border on Sudan. It was me that called a London conference and brought colleagues together on Sudan. So as a foreign minister in a Western democracy, I think I have stepped up on Sudan notwithstanding the fact that we have a war in Ukraine, we have a terrible conflict, of course, Israel-Gaza, we've had Israel-Iran, we've had India-Pakistan, we've got DRC, Rwanda, there are other conflicts. But I have lamented how little attention has been paid to conflict in Africa, of which Sudan is the worst humanitarian catastrophe on the planet, which is why when I went, I committed more money, but also why at the London conference that I called, I was pleased to get the global community committing, I think it was a further 800 million in financing to that terrible, terrible conflict, and we continue to keep on it because we need it to come to an end.
And thank you for your efforts, Foreign Secretary. Can I ask what momentum has happened since the London conference? Because the results of it were disappointing.
Well, I don't think you can describe the pledges that we got on the humanitarian side as disappointing in face of the hardship and in face of the question that I got previously on women and girls, when this is a conflict. I don't think there's any other conflict that affects quite as many women and girls as this. And I've met women raped, women burned, women terribly, terribly violated as a consequence of this conflict. We continue to work with partners to try and ease that suffering. There remain questions about aid and UN presence in country, in Sudan, and of course there remain real issues in relation to the range of partners who are involved in this conflict and how we work with them to reduce particularly the amount of weapons that are finding their way to the various sides and the groups that are fighting.
Foreign Secretary, I had an exchange last week on the Business and Trade Select Committee with the Trade Minister about export licences and arms licences, particularly in regard to the UAE. Since Sudan's war has broken out in 2023, the New York Times has repeatedly reported on the UAE arming the RSF, including funneling arms through field hospitals. And the UN panel of experts in Sudan reported to the Security Council on these allegations and found them to be credible. Given the FCDO is the DPT's key partner in reviewing arms licences, what would he make of these allegations?
Well, we continue across a range of partners. In London, we had countries that are neighbouring Sudan, other countries in the Gulf who were also had some relationship with the conflict, and we continue to emphasise the importance of refraining from actions that prolong the conflict. Of course, we do that. And a range of countries are able to use their levers to attempt to bring the parties to the negotiation table. And of course, I continue to press them to do that.
So does it trouble you, these reports, of which at the moment we're negotiating, or the government is negotiating a trade agreement?
Every aspect of the conflict in Sudan troubles me greatly.
So do you believe that the trade agreement should have, and the GCC should have, a human rights chapter attached to it? And if the human rights chapter in trade agreements, where is that driven from? Is that from the Department for Trade or from the FCDO?
Well, the United Kingdom is in a unique position to be able to deal with a range of partners, and I want to protect that position. And because that is how we were able almost to get a UN resolution. And I'd like to be able to work with other partners to get that UN resolution that protects people. And therefore I'm not going to be in the position of name-calling any particular country. I will work with all countries to minimise the violence that's taking place.
Can I turn to the humanitarian efforts and the emergency response rooms in Sudan? I know that they have been very effective. Can you talk me through how the FCDO works in supporting them at the same time as multilateral agencies that are working in the field?
The effort in Sudan is largely being led by multilaterals, because of the difficulty of working in the country. So it is a multilateral effort. I spoke to Tom Fletcher, I think it was 5 days ago. Obviously we discussed Israel-Gaza, but we also discussed our concerns about Sudan. He has been leaning in very heavily on Sudan to make sure that the aid is getting to the places where they need to get to. It would be good if we got safe zones, but we haven't achieved that at this point in time. But it is a multilateral effort, it is not a bilateral one. That would be impossible in this situation.
And finally, Foreign Secretary, can you tell me about the conversations that you're having with other regional actors since the conference on driving the diplomacy forward so that we can see an end to the war?
Yes, I spoke to the President of Angola, I spoke to President Ruto and the Kenyan Foreign Secretary. We believe it's important that we embolden the AU at this time, and that's why I brought them to the conference. And I have spoke to a range of Gulf partners about the conflict in Sudan, all of that since the conference, and there will be more, particularly as we head to UNGA in September.
Have you been able to speak to the UAE, to Egypt and to the Saudis on this particular issue?
Yes, I have.
Since the conference?
All three of those countries since the conference.
Foreign Secretary, thinking specifically about Sudan, a couple of comments, please. To reach a resolution and a lasting resolution, civil society has to be empowered. And I'm was a big fan of the CSSF fund, now the Integrated Security Fund, which was, I think, instrumental in empowering civil society to hold their leaders to account. I'm concerned that that fund is being sort of reduced and limited. Can you tell us anything, let's hope, post-conflict about how you're working with the international community to empower civil society?
I think it is important that obviously we do everything we can to shore up civil society, and given the challenges around aid and given the challenges around aid workers working in Sudan, we should remember that there are civil society organisations on the ground that we have to support, carrying much of the load at this time. I am reflecting on the integrating fund at this moment, so I can't give you an update, but I will seek either through the development minister or myself to come back to you on that.
I would appreciate that, and also sort of part of that lasting peace is holding perpetrators to account. Do you think as it currently stands, or in the near future, Sudan has the judicial capability to hold those committing attacks, specifically on aid workers, to account?
I know that some UK funding is also supporting accountability and transparency in country. It's a big country, there are atrocities happening all over, and of course we haven't talked about issues in South Sudan either, but I do know that we are contributing to that effort.
Okay, and I speak to you as a lawyer as well as the Foreign Secretary.
I haven't been a lawyer for 27 years.
A lawyer, a politician, a writer and a Foreign Secretary, bringing all of those together. Do you see that the UK could have some role in drawing the international community together to make sure that the international courts have the power, the influence and the resources to hold breaches of international humanitarian law, civil breaches when it comes to conflict to account?
At this stage, my focus has been on convening to, one, support the humanitarian effort, and to two, to try and broker a better political situation than we have at present, and that's what the London conference was about. And I've indicated that there's more to do. You're right to press on the most egregious atrocities being committed at this time and accountability for those atrocities. And you're right absolutely to press on the lack of resources that you would expect that Sudan haven't got. I will take that away and I will look at that more closely. And of course there are partners in Europe, the Netherlands, the Norwegians, that have traditionally been very present in that area, that we may be able to work more with.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Can I pass over to Tracy?
Hi, Foreign Secretary. Moving on to Gaza, with another 20 civilians killed today, how are you working with international partners to improve